Imagine a secret war, fought not with bullets, but with words, where the most powerful weapon was a pencil and paper. Who were the brilliant minds behind the scenes, whose victories saved countless lives, but remained unknown for decades? Discover the untold stories of the code breakers, the hidden heroes of WWII who changed the course of history.
Welcome to our channel, the place where knowledge meets curiosity. Here, we dive deep into the wonders of history, science, culture, and mysteries that shape our world. Every video is designed to open your mind and spark your imagination. So sit back, relax, and let's begin this incredible journey together. Now we explain the Code Breakers, World War II's hidden heroes. In the years leading up to the Second World War, the European continent simmered with rising tensions, unchecked ambition, and a growing sense of foreboding. Nations jostled for power, alliances formed and dissolved, and the world's military forces braced for a conflict that felt almost inevitable. But far from the spotlight of political speeches and military parades, an entirely different kind of battle was already underway. This was a silent war, fought not with tanks, planes, or artillery, but with intellect, logic, and the relentless pursuit of patterns hidden within chaos. It was a war waged by men and women who were not soldiers in the traditional sense, yet whose contributions would prove decisive in determining the fate of millions. These individuals would become known as the Code Breakers, the clandestine heroes who operated in secrecy, far from the front lines, yet whose every breakthrough echoed across battlefields worldwide. Among the most formidable challenges of this secret war was the German Enigma machine, a device so intricate that its creators believed it to be unbreakable. Its constantly shifting combinations, produced by rotating rotors and an elaborate plug board, ensured that German communications were wrapped in layer after layer of encryption. Every midnight, thousands of German operatives across the continent recalibrated their machines to new daily settings, creating a cryptographic puzzle that reset itself daily. For those tasked with deciphering its secrets, the pressure was immense. Successfully breaking Enigma even once was a triumph. Breaking it consistently, every day, became a necessity. Lives depended on it. Convoys crossing the Atlantic, troops advancing across North Africa, and pilots engaging in fierce aerial combat all required accurate intelligence. In a war where one decision could alter the world's trajectory, information was the most valuable currency. It was against this backdrop that a small, unlikely group of thinkers assembled at a large Victorian mansion hidden deep in the English countryside. Bletchley Park, with its quiet gardens and unassuming architecture, would emerge as the headquarters of the most ambitious code-breaking operation in history. Here, linguists, mathematicians, crossword enthusiasts, chess champions, classicists, and engineers gathered under strict secrecy. They worked in makeshift huts, often in near constant cold, surrounded by chalkboards filled with equations, scattered notes, typewriters clacking endlessly, and the ever-present tension of an invisible deadline. Every intercepted message held the possibility of a breakthrough, yet every minute lost meant German U-boats might find another convoy or Allied soldiers might walk into an ambush. The responsibility rested heavily on their shoulders, but so did the determination to defeat an enemy who believed no one could possibly decode their communications. Among the early pioneers of this intellectual war was the brilliant but introverted mathematician Alan Turing. With his eccentric demeanor, habit of chaining his mug to a radiator to prevent theft, and his unique ability to perceive patterns where others saw noise, Turing would become synonymous with the code-breaking effort. But he did not work alone. Polish cryptologists had paved the way years earlier, making early breakthroughs that defied expectations and laying the foundation for Enigma's ultimate defeat. Their work, conducted under tremendous pressure as Poland faced invasion, provided the Allies with invaluable insights and physical replicas of Enigma machines.
ensuring that Bletchley Park did not start from scratch. Their contribution, long overshadowed by later achievements, was a testament to the global effort required in decoding the Axis powers' communications. As the war progressed and Enigma's complexity evolved, so too did the methods used to attack it. Mathematical reasoning alone was no longer sufficient, and Turing's theoretical brilliance took on physical form in the creation of the bomb machine. This large, whirring electromechanical device worked tirelessly to test countless potential Enigma settings, effectively automating much of the most tedious and time-consuming aspects of decryption. Operators monitored its spinning drums as they searched for a logical contradiction, a sign that a particular setting could not be correct, or a faint glimmer of hope in the form of a potential breakthrough. The bomb machines soon filled entire rooms with their mechanical hum, becoming the beating heart of Bletchley Park's operations. The code-breaking effort had shifted from pencil and paper deduction to a hybrid of human insight and mechanical computation, setting the stage for the future of computer science. But Bletchley Park was far more than just its machines and mathematics. It was a community bound together by secrecy, duty, and an unwavering sense of purpose. Many of the individuals who arrived had no idea what they would be doing until they stepped foot on the grounds. They were greeted with a simple message: the nature of your work is to remain strictly confidential. From that moment on, they lived double lives, outwardly ordinary citizens contributing modestly to the war effort, yet internally carrying the weight of some of the most sensitive intelligence in existence. They were forbidden to discuss their work with friends, family members, or even colleagues in other huts. A woman working in Hut 6 might not know that her friend in Hut 3 was interpreting the very messages she had helped decrypt. Their secrecy was so absolute that many went their entire lives without their families learning the true scale of their contributions until decades after the war ended. The atmosphere within Bletchley Park was one of constant urgency. Every moment mattered, and yet the nature of the work demanded intense concentration and patience. Days blurred into nights as cryptanalysts, linguists, clerks, and machine operators worked tirelessly under dim lights and the drumming of rain on the hut's roofs. There were moments of triumph when a rotor pattern was decoded, when a message finally made sense, when an intercepted communication provided a glimpse into German plans. But these victories were tempered by the knowledge that the enemy was always adopting. New ciphers emerged, new layers of complexity were introduced. Every breakthrough was followed by a silent question: how long before the Germans changed their system again?
As the Allies expanded their understanding of Enigma, their attention eventually turned to even more complex codes, including those used by the Luftwaffe and the formidable naval Enigma, which implemented an additional rotor and tighter security protocols. This was the version responsible for coordinating the infamous U-boat wolf packs that ravaged Allied supply lines across the Atlantic. Cracking it became not only a matter of intelligence, but a matter of survival for nations reliant on those supply routes. For months at a time, the naval Enigma seemed impenetrable, leaving convoys vulnerable and codebreakers increasingly desperate. Yet through determination, ingenuity, and a combination of psychological insight and mathematical prowess, the codebreakers achieved one of the most celebrated breakthroughs of the war, altering the course of the Battle of the Atlantic and safeguarding the vital lifeline between Britain and its allies. At the same time, the human stories behind the code-breaking operation unfolded quietly. The women of Bletchley Park, who made up nearly 3/4 of the workforce, played irreplaceable roles in deciphering messages, operating machines, organizing intercepts, and maintaining the operational flow that kept the entire system running. Though history often overlooked their contributions, the war could not have been won without their diligence, resilience, and analytical skill. They worked long hours under extreme pressure, often without recognition, yet their sense of purpose remained unwavering. Many of them were young women, students, teachers, linguists, and ordinary civilians who were thrust into one of the most significant intelligence operations in modern history. The stakes of their work were not theoretical. Every decrypted message had real-world consequences. A single line of text could reveal hidden minefields, troop movements, or submarine positions. A deciphered weather report could determine the timing of an invasion. Intelligence gleaned from code-breaking influenced operations across Africa, Europe, and the Pacific, It contributed to the success of the Normandy landings, protected merchant fleets, and undermined Axis strategies before they could be executed. The Codebreakers' achievements shortened the war by an estimated 2 to 4 years and saved millions of lives. Yet for decades, those same heroes lived in silence, bound by oaths that prevented them from sharing their stories, even as the world celebrated victories they helped make possible.
As the Second World War gained momentum and Europe plunged deeper into turmoil, the shadow war of intelligence widened dramatically. In the early years of the conflict, the Allies were still learning the full scope of the German cryptographic infrastructure. Messages intercepted by ground stations, monitoring posts, naval ships, and covert listening facilities filled the airwaves every hour. These transmissions traveled across frequencies from the North Atlantic to the deserts of Libya and the icy edges of Scandinavia. Every day, thousands of coded signals flashed through the atmosphere. Messages from commanders to their divisions, supply orders, reconnaissance reports, naval positioning updates, weather forecasts, ceremonial notices, and even mundane administrative instructions. Hidden within these transmissions were the patterns, clues, and structural weaknesses that the Bletchley Park Codebreakers desperately sought. But to understand how the war of intelligence evolved in this period, one must grasp the sheer complexity of German communications and the unrelenting pressure under which the cryptanalysts worked. The Enigma machine remained the centerpiece of Germany's encrypted communication strategy, yet what many outside the intelligence community did not know was that Enigma was not a singular system. There were multiple versions: Army, Air Force, Navy, and even versions used by secret police units and diplomatic services. Each had slight variations, different rotor sets, plugboard configurations, and operational procedures. The German Navy, the Kriegsmarine, operated the most secure version, adding an extra rotor and employing stricter discipline in encryption protocols. Their operators were trained with meticulous care, aware that even small mistakes in message formatting or repetition could provide the Allies with vital clues. In contrast, the Luftwaffe, German Air Force, was infamous for sloppier communications, sometimes repeating phrases or using predictable weather report formats that codebreakers relied upon to crack fresh keys. The Army fell somewhere in the middle. Its vast operational scale meant predictable messages sometimes slipped through, but overall the German cryptographic discipline remained formidable. Bletchley Park gradually realized that the only way to keep up with the constant flood of German intercepts was to establish a system of parallel processing long before the concept existed in the computing world. The park grew rapidly as more specialists were recruited and placed into specific huts representing unique areas of intelligence. Hut 6 worked primarily on decoding German Army and Air Force Enigma. Hut 3 dealt with translating and interpreting the decrypted materials. Hut 8, guided by Alan Turing and later Hugh Alexander, focused on naval Enigma. Hut 4 interpreted naval messages once broken. Each hut developed a personality of its own. Hut 6 was known for intense silence, chalk-covered hands, and nearly frantic bursts of calculation. Hut 8 was known for its odd working hours, eccentric thinkers, and the distinct smell of burning cigarettes and machine oil mingling in the air from the bomb rooms. The park became a network of interconnected minds, some young, some seasoned, some unconventional, but all driven by the urgency of the task.
The bomb machines themselves multiplied in number at an astonishing pace. Turing's early prototype proved effective, but as German procedures altered, more machines were desperately needed. Engineer Gordon Welchman refined Turing's design by introducing the diagonal board, a brilliant advancement that drastically improved the efficiency of the bombs. This innovation transformed code breaking from a theoretical battle into one increasingly dominated by electromechanical innovation. Soon, entire rooms were dedicated to housing these colossal devices. They stood like metallic monoliths, their rotating drums spinning continuously, producing a relentless mechanical hum. Operators, mostly young women from the Women's Royal Naval Service, or WRENS, monitored them for long hours, listening for the subtle shift in sound that signaled a potential match. When such a moment occurred, it triggered a sequence of rapid activity. The output was documented and rushed across the park to the next hut for verification. These potential keys then had to be tested manually on replica Enigma machines to validate whether the settings were correct. Only then could the decrypted messages be sent to the intelligence analysts who would transform raw data into actionable insight. The intelligence derived from breaking Enigma was codenamed Ultra, and it quickly grew into one of the most valuable assets in the Allied arsenal. But the path from decryption to action was far from straightforward. Ultra-intelligence had to be carefully protected. If the Germans suspected their communications were compromised, they would immediately overhaul their cryptographic systems. Thus, elaborate cover stories were devised to mask the true source of intelligence. When an Allied operation succeeded based on ultra information, it had to appear as though the success resulted from reconnaissance aircraft, radio interception, or traditional espionage. This deception sometimes required sacrificing opportunities or even lives to preserve the secrecy of ultra. It was one of the heaviest ethical burdens borne by the codebreakers and the intelligence officers responsible for evaluating and distributing their findings. One of the most dramatic turning points in the intelligence war came with the struggle against German U-boats in the Atlantic. The Battle of the Atlantic was a prolonged fight for the control of supply routes between North America and Europe. Without food, fuel, weapons, and industrial supplies delivered by convoys across the ocean, Britain would collapse. The U-boats, organized into deadly wolf packs, lurked beneath the waves waiting for the convoys. Using encrypted messages, they coordinated attacks that sometimes devastated entire fleets. Breaking the naval enigma was therefore essential not just for military success, but for Britain's survival. Early in the war, Bletchley Park achieved significant breakthroughs against naval enigma, but the Germans constantly improved their systems, adding the notorious fourth rotor in 1942. This upgrade threw Bletchley Park into crisis. Months passed with no successful decrypts, and German U-boats began inflicting enormous casualties on Allied convoys. Morale faltered. Reports described entire supply ships sinking to the bottom of the Atlantic, their crews lost without a trace. Pressure mounted on Hut 8 to find a solution. Turing, Alexander, and their team pushed themselves to exhaustion as they tried to adapt their methods to the new complexity.
The eventual breakthrough came through a combination of mathematical insight, captured documents, and relentless mechanical computation. On several occasions, Allied ships seized U-boat codebooks and cipher materials from damaged or sinking submarines. These risky operations cost lives but provided invaluable data. Codebooks gave the Allies temporary windows of clarity, brief periods when decrypts became possible again. During these windows, codebreakers worked around the clock, scarcely eating or sleeping, determined to extract every ounce of intelligence before the Germans issued new key sheets. With each victory, the Allies regained control of the Atlantic, and the tide slowly but decisively turned against the U-boats. While the war in the Atlantic was fierce and unforgiving, the Mediterranean theater presented its own cryptographic challenges. German and Italian forces communicated using several different cipher systems, some of which were less complex but issued in massive quantities. The North African campaign, in particular, generated an enormous stream of messages. Rommel, the famed desert fox, was a master tactician whose agility and unpredictability made him one of the most feared commanders of the war. Breaking his communications often provided crucial insight into his strategy, allowing Allied forces to anticipate maneuvers and respond effectively. Bletchley Park's ability to read Luftwaffe traffic enabled the Allies to understand the supply shortages affecting the German Africa Corps, giving them a strategic advantage as battles unfolded across the harsh desert terrain. Yet, for every triumph, the codebreakers faced setbacks. Not all ciphers could be broken. Not all intelligence came in time. Some breakthroughs arrived too late to prevent disaster. The codebreakers lived with the knowledge that the work they failed to complete might result in casualties on the battlefield. This knowledge weighed heavily on them, especially in moments when messages hinted at impending danger but could not be deciphered in time. Their war was fought not with physical weapons, but with the clock. Every second counted. Fatigue became a constant companion, yet they pressed on, driven by a mixture of duty, determination, and the deep understanding that their work shaped the course of history. The human side of Bletchley Park grew more complex during this period as well. New recruits, some barely out of school, others seasoned academics, arrived in waves. Many were chosen through unconventional methods, such as crossword competitions in newspapers or recommendations from university professors.
Their arrival transformed the atmosphere of the park into a vibrant tapestry of diverse personalities. Brilliant minds clashed at times due to conflicting methods or intellectual pride. Friendships formed under intense pressure. Romantic relationships emerged quietly, though often constrained by the secrecy that governed their lives. There were moments of levity, musical evenings, improvised drama performances, or midnight conversations over weak tea in drafty huts. But beneath these small escapes lingered the unshakable truth. Their work was critical to the war effort, and failure was not an option.
The diversity of skills at Bletchley Park widened as new languages, new cipher systems, and new operational needs emerged. Japanese codes demanded specialized linguists familiar with complex written characters. Italian communications, though sometimes dismissed as less disciplined, required experts in Romance languages and regional dialects. Swedish, Spanish, Romanian, Hungarian, and even obscure Baltic languages became relevant as the intelligence web stretched across continents. Every new front introduced fresh layers of encrypted communication, often with unique quirks or predictable operator habits that skilled cryptanalysts could exploit. The global nature of the war meant that intelligence flowed from every direction, and Bletchley Park became the central hub where these streams converged. As intelligence became more valuable, the need for secure communication within the Allied network intensified. The British developed their own encryption systems to protect ultra-derived intelligence when sharing it with American forces. This required coordination between cryptographers on both sides of the Atlantic. The United States eventually established its own code-breaking headquarters in Arlington Hall and the Naval Communications Annex. The relationship between the British and American intelligence communities grew stronger, forming the foundation of what would later become one of the most enduring intelligence alliances in modern history.
As the war stretched into its middle years and the world's great powers clashed across continents, the unseen war of intelligence reached levels of intensity never before imagined. Every side escalated its cryptographic defenses and countermeasures. Every victory or defeat on land, sea, or sky became intertwined with the encrypted signals racing across the airwaves. And every day, within the confines of Bletchley Park and its expanding network of secret facilities, the codebreakers confronted new challenges that tested the very limits of their ingenuity, endurance, and emotional resilience. By this time, Bletchley Park had grown far beyond the quiet estate it had been before the war. Huts multiplied across the grounds. New buildings, Block A, Block B, Block C, and others, rose quickly to house the rapidly expanding workforce and machinery. The influx of new personnel forced the administration to streamline processes. Everything from intercept handling to message prioritization required unprecedented organization. Intercept stations across Britain and its territories, known as WWII stations, listened tirelessly to German, Italian, and Japanese transmissions. Their operators sat in dimly lit rooms wearing headphones, scribbling codes, call signs, and fragments of encrypted transmissions. These intercepts were then transmitted to Bletchley Park, where they were sorted, categorized, and assigned to teams for decoding. The work, by now, moved at a pace that mirrored the tempo of the global conflict. As battles raged in North Africa, Europe, Russia, and the Pacific, intercepted messages poured in by the thousands. The codebreakers found themselves not only deciphering, but predicting patterns, anticipating when the Germans might change their procedures, adapting to the introduction of new cipher devices, and managing the overwhelming volume of traffic. The Germans, unaware that their systems were compromised, remained confident in Enigma's invincibility. But even in their confidence, they were not complacent. They issued new keys, improved operator discipline in certain branches, and occasionally introduced special ciphers for high-value messages. Each change sent ripples through Bletchley Park. Every new cipher felt like a blow, a challenge issued across the battlefield to the hidden minds in the huts. Among the many specialized groups at Bletchley Park, the team responsible for breaking the offizier traffic, secret messages sent exclusively among German officers, faced some of the most intricate challenges.
these messages were often encoded twice, first using classical systems, then through Enigma. The layered complexity was designed to ensure that only the most secure communications reached senior commanders. Yet even these, with time, fell to the codebreakers' relentless effort. Piece by piece, the structure of German command communications came into focus, providing the Allies with invaluable knowledge about chain-of-command decisions, reinforcements, resource shortages, and operational intentions.
But the war of intelligence was no longer limited to Enigma alone. By the middle of the conflict, the Germans had deployed several specialized cipher machines. Among them was the Geheimschreiber, nicknamed the Fish Cipher by the British. Unlike Enigma, the Fish Cipher was used for high-level communications between Hitler and his generals. It operated through teleprinter signals and utilized a series of wheel patterns to produce incredibly complex encrypted output. When the British first encountered these signals, they assumed they were unbreakable. But the codebreakers possessed something even the German designers could not anticipate: human intuition combined with relentless mathematical discipline. The turning point came when a German operator made a critical mistake, repeating a lengthy message using the same key settings. This rare blunder allowed British cryptanalyst Bill Tutt to deduce the structure of the cipher machine entirely through logic and pattern analysis, despite never seeing the actual device. It was an intellectual breakthrough of extraordinary magnitude, comparable to unraveling an alien technology purely through intercepted signals. Once the structure was revealed, the British engineers began constructing a machine capable of processing the cipher. This machine, known as Colossus, would become humanity's first true programmable electronic computer. It used vacuum tubes, high-speed circuits, and logical processing to analyze the complex cipher patterns of fish messages. The arrival of Colossus revolutionized the code-breaking effort. What once took days of manual effort could now be processed in hours. This leap in computational capability did not simply crack messages. It opened an entirely new era in technological progress. Colossus stood at the threshold of modern computing, an artifact born out of necessity, built in secrecy, and destined to influence the digital world for generations to come. But at the time of its creation, it was simply another tool in the desperate effort to stay ahead of the Axis war machine. Every new machine, however, came with its own demands. Operators needed training. Engineers needed to maintain the delicate vacuum tubes. Analysts needed to develop new workflows to handle the unprecedented volume of material being decoded. Bletchley Park expanded its operations, not just physically but intellectually. It became a place where innovation surged constantly, a hive of minds driven by urgency, creativity, and the belief that knowledge could change the fate of nations. Yet, with innovation came immense pressure. Many of the codebreakers found themselves pushed to emotional breaking points. The secrecy surrounding their work meant they had no outlet to discuss their frustrations or triumphs. They lived in a universe of muted accomplishments. Every breakthrough had to be celebrated silently. Every failure was borne alone. The psychological toll was immense. There were moments when codebreakers experienced deep despair when messages remained unreadable, when news arrived of attacks that might have been prevented, or when they felt suffocated by the relentless weight of expectations.
For the women who operated the bombs and later Colossus, the pressure was equally unyielding. Their role required precision, stamina, and intense focus. Many worked through the night, their shifts rotating in unforgiving cycles. They endured freezing huts in winter and sweltering rooms in summer, yet never wavered. Their hands grew accustomed to the constant handling of switches, wiring panels, and paper tapes. Many were barely in their 20s, yet they carried responsibilities that shaped entire military campaigns. And still, when the war ended, many of them returned to ordinary lives, quietly carrying memories of a war that few knew they had helped to win. As breakthroughs continued, ultra-intelligence expanded into every major theater of the conflict. The Eastern Front, where the German army clashed with the Soviet Union in some of the largest battles in human history,
generated enormous amounts of encrypted traffic. While the Soviets never learned the full extent of British code-breaking capabilities during the war, insights derived from Ultra allowed the Allies to understand key aspects of German deployments and logistical conditions on the Eastern Front. These decrypts helped Allied planners predict German weaknesses, anticipate troop withdrawals, and even identify moments when German forces were stretched thin. Information that shaped strategic decisions made in London and Washington. In the Mediterranean, code-breaking played a critical role in enabling Allied forces to outmaneuver Axis troops across Italy, Greece, and the Balkans. Ultra intelligence helped identify German reinforcement routes, supply shortages, and evacuation plans. When the Allies planned the invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, Ultra provided key details on German defenses, allowing for a strategic feint that misled the German High Command into believing the invasion would occur elsewhere. This deception contributed heavily to the success of the landings and accelerated the collapse of Axis control in southern Europe. But perhaps one of the greatest impacts of Ultra came during the planning and execution of D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history. By this time, the fish cipher had been penetrated through Colossus, providing a clear view into German command communications. Enigma decrypts revealed the positioning of German divisions, supply shortages across the Western Front, and the precise structure of the Atlantic Wall defenses. This intelligence allowed the Allies to craft an extraordinarily detailed plan of attack. Ultra also played a vital role in deception operations, including Operation Fortitude, which convinced the Germans that the main invasion would occur at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. This deception led the Germans to withhold vital reinforcements during the first critical days of the Normandy landings. The German High Command, misled by their own encrypted communications, which the Allies were reading, continued to believe the Normandy landings were a diversion long after the beaches had been secured.
As the Second World War moved steadily towards its decisive final years, the secret war of intelligence took on dimensions more complex, more delicate, and more influential than anything that had come before. The work at Bletchley Park, once a desperate attempt to understand the enemy's intentions, had evolved into an intricate symphony of decipherment, deception, analysis, and strategic manipulation. By now, Ultra intelligence was not merely a supportive force. It had become one of the central pillars of Allied planning. But with that new power came deeper responsibilities, more formidable challenges, and moral dilemmas that weighed heavily on those who possessed information others did not even know existed. At this stage of the war, Bletchley Park was operating at monumental scale. Thousands of individuals worked tirelessly across dozens of huts, blocks, and satellite stations. The complex resembled a miniature city. Day and night shifts overlapped in never-ending cycles. Vans carrying intercepts arrived in constant streams. Code sheets, cipher scraps, and punch tapes moved between huts in sealed envelopes. Every corridor buzzed with urgency. Every room hummed with machines. The clicking of bomb bays, the whir of Colossus, the chatter of typewriters, and the low murmur of analysts arguing over potential cipher patterns created a soundscape that became synonymous with the secret heartbeat of Allied intelligence. One of the most dramatic developments during this period was the rise of coordinated deception operations. While codebreakers had always been wary of revealing Ultra's existence, the final years of the war saw the systematic use of intelligence to shape not only Allied strategy, but German perception itself. The Allied commanders realized that knowing the enemy's plans was only half the battle. The other half was ensuring the enemy never suspected that his own communications were compromised. To achieve this, the Allies built an intricate web of deception, one that relied on false radio traffic, double agents, dummy military installations, and fabricated evidence designed to guide the German High Command into drawing the conclusions the Allies wanted them to draw. The most famous of these operations unfolded in the lead-up to D-Day, Operation Fortitude. But its success was not just the result of clever decoys or imaginative spies. It was deeply rooted in Ultra intelligence. Because the Allies read German communications, they knew exactly what the Germans believed and how their perceptions shifted over time.
Every deceptive signal, every fabricated troop movement, every false message was precisely calibrated to fill gaps in the German narrative. Agents such as Juan Pujol Garcia, known to the British as Garbo, fed carefully crafted misinformation to the German Abwehr. Bletchley Park read the German responses and adjusted the deception accordingly, guiding an entire enemy command structure like a puppet on invisible strings. During this period, the codebreakers found themselves in a strange paradox. Their work, though rooted in secrecy, was shaping some of the largest military operations in human history. They could see the war unfolding from a vantage point almost no one else possessed. They read messages that revealed Hitler's reactions to Allied movements, German fear of invasion, Japanese hopes for delaying tactics, and Italian uncertainty in the final days before their collapse. It was a godlike perspective in a world burning on all fronts, a position that carried both power and torment. Their work saved lives daily, but it also demanded silence when action might expose the source of their knowledge. They watched convoys attacked when they could not intervene. They saw divisions move into danger knowing they could not warn them without giving away the truth. They knew the enemy's weaknesses, yet sometimes they had to allow the enemy to strike, because preventing the blow would jeopardize far greater strategic outcomes. This moral equation, sacrifice in the present to safeguard the future, haunted many who worked at Bletchley Park. The codebreakers were not only deciphering enemy messages, they were interpreting the enemy's psyche. The analysts studied not just what German commanders said, but how they phrased their orders, how urgently they communicated, what times of day they transmitted reports, and which branches exhibited stress through increased traffic volume. They learned the rhythm of the German war machine. They recognized the signatures of individual operators, noticing subtle habits in how they typed or structured weather messages. When one operator was replaced, they sensed it before the German high command even registered the shift. These subtle forms of intelligence, unwritten, almost invisible, formed an entire world of pattern recognition that existed only in the minds of the codebreakers. In the final years of the war, this kind of insight proved pivotal in the struggle against the German V-weapon program. The V-1 flying bombs and later the V-2 rockets represented a new and terrifying form of warfare. They were fast, destructive, and difficult to intercept. Early intelligence on the program was scattered across reconnaissance photos, agent reports, and intercepted communications. But once Bletchley Park began breaking high-level messages about test sites, launch schedules, and logistical constraints, the Allies gained crucial insight into the development and deployment of the weapons.
Ultra-intelligence revealed that the Germans were readying mass launches against London, Antwerp, and other strategic cities. Using this information, Allied bombers, guided indirectly by intelligence shaped at Bletchley Park, struck manufacturing plants, fuel storage depots, and launch sites. The strikes delayed the program significantly and reduced the scale of destruction these weapons might otherwise have inflicted. Meanwhile, decrypts of German logistical messages allowed the Allies to monitor the movement of mobile V-2 launch units. While the V-2 could not be intercepted once launched, destroying launch support networks crippled the German ability to sustain the campaign. This period also saw code-breaking influence the war in Italy as the Allies pushed north through mountainous terrain. Ultra revealed supply constraints, division transfers, and the dwindling morale of German troops defending the Gothic line. When German commanders shifted their defenses based on Allied feints, Bletchley Park intercepted and decoded those responses, allowing Allied planners to anticipate the new defensive lines even before they were fully established. Many of the breakthroughs in Italy owed their success to this dance between deception and decipherment. Meanwhile, in the Pacific theater, the American allies with whom the British shared intelligence through highly controlled channels made dramatic progress against Japanese communications. Although the Japanese encryption systems differed significantly from Enigma, they possessed their own vulnerabilities. American cryptanalysts at Station Hypo and other units achieved major breakthroughs, most famously prior to the Battle of Midway. By the time British and American intelligence systems were working in full cooperation, both sides exchanged mission-critical insights, reinforcing one another's strategic efforts. Bletchley Park contributed to decrypting messages related to Japanese diplomatic and naval communications, shedding light on Japan's strategic intentions during the final stage of the conflict. Yet, even amidst these successes, challenges continued to emerge. The Germans, though confident in their machinery, began modifying operational procedures, sometimes drastically. Occasionally, shifts in German communication traffic indicated potential breakthroughs, moments when the enemy seemed poised to alter encryption methods entirely. Had they done so, Bletchley Park's careful web of decrypts could have collapsed overnight. Every such moment sent shockwaves through the huts, hoping that the German confidence in Enigma's invulnerability would prevent catastrophic changes. Fortunately, arrogance worked in the Allies' favor. The Germans believed their ciphers unbreakable. That belief became one of the most significant intelligence failures of the war, one that cost them immeasurably.
The closer the war drew to its end, the more emotionally complex the experience at Bletchley Park became. Codebreakers found themselves confronting the human reality of the conflict through the messages they read. Orders for retreat, pleas for reinforcements, reports of catastrophic fuel shortages, descriptions of entire divisions decimated on the Eastern Front. As German communications revealed the collapse of morale and the disintegration of their supply networks, the war's brutality unfolded in stark terms for the analysts. They felt, in a strange way, more connected to certain enemy commanders than to many Allied officers. They recognized individual German call signs by habit. They sensed when a familiar operator was replaced, perhaps killed, captured, or relocated. The war's tragedy became deeply personal in ways few outside intelligence could comprehend. As Allied forces prepared for the final offensives into Germany, Ultra provided real-time insight into the shifting positions of remaining divisions, their defensive strategies, and their desperate attempts to hold off both Eastern and Western advances. When Hitler issued increasingly irrational orders, the decrypts reflected chaos within the German command structure. Messages oscillated between false bravado and quiet panic. High-level communications betrayed fractures between senior officers. All of this gave Allied planners an unparalleled understanding of the enemy's mindset at the moment of collapse. And yet, throughout these final months, the codebreakers maintained the same unyielding secrecy that had defined their existence from the beginning. Even as victory approached, they could tell no one what they had done. There were no celebrations when major breakthroughs were achieved, no applause when their insights shaped decisive battles. Victory parties in the streets of London were shared by millions, but the codebreakers were absent. Their triumphs remained locked behind the official secrets that governed their lives. When the war ended, the world hailed generals, admirals, and politicians. The hidden heroes of Bletchley Park returned quietly to their ordinary lives, carrying memories they could not share for decades. From the moment the war ended in 1945, the world began rebuilding itself on the ruins of cities, nations, and ideologies. But buried beneath that reconstruction was a quieter, far more fragile truth, one built not of concrete or steel, but of silence. The men and women who had waged a war of intellect, who had dismantled the Axis war machine through logic, mathematics, pattern recognition, intuition, and tireless nights over scattered sheets of incomprehensible symbols, walked back into ordinary life without fanfare, without medals, and without any public acknowledgement of what their minds had accomplished. They returned to farms, offices, classrooms, and quiet suburban neighborhoods, carrying with them a burden perhaps heavier than war itself. They could not speak a word of what they had done. Their stories would remain locked in classified vaults for decades. Their contributions would remain invisible. Their brilliance would remain uncredited. Yet their legacy would outlast armadas and outshine artillery. It would shape the Cold War, revolutionize computing, redefine national security, and create the blueprint for digital intelligence in an era no one had yet imagined. This is the final chapter of their journey, the legacy of the codebreakers, the hidden heroes who changed the future long before the world realized it. As nations celebrated victory, codebreakers in Bletchley Park received sealed envelopes informing them that everything they had done was now classified under the Official Secrets Act for the rest of their lives. They could not tell their parents, spouses, or children. Many would go to their graves never speaking of their achievements. Some would die thinking their wartime contributions had been forgotten. The silence was absolute. And for decades, their absence from historical records meant that battles, strategies, and turning points were credited to generals and admirals without any mention of the invisible calculations behind them. Historians wrote about troop movements without realizing those movements had been guided by intercepted and decrypted enemy communications. They praised commanders for foresight that had been provided by the world's greatest mathematicians hidden in wooden huts. The public assumed luck or strategic brilliance, never knowing the secret world of machines and minds that ensured victory long before soldiers ever set foot on the battlefield. But the world they had helped create was not one that could ever revert to its pre-war simplicity. Their work had reshaped intelligence forever. Before WWII, code-breaking had been a small, specialized domain practiced by naval officers and enthusiastic amateurs. After the war, it became the beating heart of national defense. Nations realized for the first time that wars could be won not only by firepower or manpower, but by information. By knowing the enemy's plans before the enemy acted. By peering into the communications networks that held empires together. It was not airplanes or tanks that had given the Allies the decisive advantage. It was knowledge, extracted from encoded messages that had once been believed unbreakable. The myth of the unbreakable cipher had died in WWII, and with it died the notion that secrecy was any nation's guaranteed shield. From that realization, a new era was born, the era of signal intelligence, or SIGINT, the global system of surveillance and data interception that would dominate the Cold War.
At the center of this transformation was a man whose contributions had been suppressed for decades, Alan Turing. The world remembered him as a mathematician, later as a tragic figure, but only after declassification did it become clear that he had been one of the principal architects of modern computing. Enigma, once thought to be a machine of infinite permutations, had yielded to his mind. His thinking had planted the seed of mechanized logic, the idea that machines could perform calculations faster, more accurately, and more consistently than humans. When he walked into Bletchley Park in 1939, the word computer still meant a person who computed numbers by hand. When he left, the word had begun its transformation into something else entirely. Without Turing, it is likely that the world would not have had programmable computers when it did. Without code-breaking, there may have been no digital age. Yet Turing never received recognition during his lifetime. His work remained hidden behind layers of classification. His own government prosecuted him for his private life, ignoring the fact that he had helped shorten the war by years and saved millions of lives. His contributions were rediscovered long after his death, when classified archives began to open in the 1970s. Only then did the public begin to understand how profoundly he had shaped their world. But Turing was not alone. The legacy of code-breaking belonged to thousands. Linguists who could detect a grammatical inconsistency in Japanese naval messages. Mathematicians who could decipher a shifted coefficient in a German cipher. Engineers who could build machines that process data at speeds previously unimaginable, and women whose labor, intuition, and attention to detail caught vulnerabilities that no machine could detect. Together, they became the backbone of a future they would never see. The end of WWII did not end the need for cryptanalysis. In fact, it intensified it. As soon as wartime alliances dissolved into rivalry, Western and Soviet intelligence agencies raced to recruit codebreakers. The secrets behind the Axis codes had shown how powerful mathematical intelligence could be, and both sides sought to build organizations that could detect and intercept every possible form of communication from the opposing bloc. Bletchley Park's post-war successor, GCHQ, Government Communications Headquarters, became Britain's nerve center for global signals intelligence. In America, the Wartime Signal Intelligence Service evolved into the NSA, established in 1952, one of the most secretive and powerful institutions in the world. The Cold War became a war of hidden messages, encrypted channels in surveillance satellites, and the codebreakers of World War II had laid the intellectual foundation for every part of it. But the technological legacy of the codebreakers extended far beyond espionage. The principles developed in Bletchley Park and other allied cryptologic centers shaped the very foundations of modern computer science. The concept of algorithmic problem solving, the logical structure of computational processes, the idea that machines could be programmed to analyze patterns, all of these were born from the urgency of wartime codebreaking. The bomb and the Colossus, designed in secrecy and dismantled after the war, had been the world's first large-scale electromechanical and electronic computing devices. Their existence remained classified for decades, preventing early computer pioneers from receiving the recognition they deserved. But when their designs were finally declassified, historians realized that the origins of digital computing had not begun in peaceful research laboratories, but in the quiet desperation of war.
In many ways, the world inherited not only the technology of the codebreakers, but also their philosophy. They had shown that complex problems, even problems the world believed unsolvable, could be broken down into manageable parts, analyzed systematically, and solved with persistence and creativity. Their approach became the internal logic of computers themselves. Break a large problem into smaller steps, search for patterns, eliminate improbable solutions, and iterate until the answer emerges. Modern algorithms follow this blueprint. Artificial intelligence echoes it. Digital security challenges it, and cybersecurity seeks to resist the very methods that codebreakers once used to dismantle enemy systems. Yet perhaps the deepest legacy of the codebreakers lies in the moral questions they left behind. They had created the tools for a world where nothing communicated electronically was truly private. Their breakthrough had proven both a triumph and a warning. If wartime ciphers could be broken, so could peacetime ones. If machines could intercept and decode messages from enemy nations, they could just as easily be used to monitor civilians. Though few foresaw it at the time, the codebreakers had opened the door to a future in which the boundaries between security and privacy would blur, and where intelligence agencies would become guardians not only of national defense, but of vast reservoirs of information. As the decades passed and their work remained hidden, former codebreakers lived in a strange dual existence. They carried memories of quiet heroism, but could not speak of them. They saw the world evolve in ways that were shaped by their own work, but could not claim any part of it. Some struggled with the secrecy, others embraced it. Many continued working in intelligence or academia, still applying the skills they had sharpened during the war, but almost all shared a humility that seemed out of place for people who had shaped history. They had never seen themselves as warriors. They had never held rifles. Some had never even heard the sound of a distant explosion. Their battlefield was a desk. Their weapon was a pencil. Their victories were measured not in captured territory, but in intercepted dispatches that could not be traced back to them. The secrecy surrounding their achievements began to lift gradually, beginning in the 1970s and accelerating in the 1990s. Research papers, memoirs, and declassified documents revealed the truth. That codebreaking had shortened the war by an estimated 2 to 4 years, that millions of lives had been saved, that the outcome of battles from the Atlantic to North Africa to the Pacific had been influenced by intelligence the public never knew existed. The revelations shocked the world. Historians rewrote chapters. Museums built exhibits. Bletchley Park, once abandoned and nearly demolished, was restored and converted into a national heritage site. Former codebreakers in their later years finally stepped into the light of recognition. Some lived long enough to see school children walk through the huts where they had once worked in frozen winter nights. Others lived long enough to receive honors from governments that had once forbidden them from speaking. Many did not. Their silence had outlasted them.
But the legacy of codebreaking did not end with the declassification of wartime secrets. Its influence extends into every digital interaction of the modern world. Cryptography has evolved into a science of extraordinary complexity, protecting global financial systems, safeguarding private communications, and enabling the secure exchange of data across millions of devices. Encryption underpins everything from online banking to national defense. Yet the principles governing modern cryptography are direct descendants of the wartime struggle to break and create ciphers. The tension between secrecy and access, between secure communication and the ability to decode it, remains at the center of global security debates. Code-breaking lives on not only as a historical achievement, but as an ongoing battle that shapes international diplomacy, cybersecurity, and digital freedom. In understanding the legacy of the codebreakers, it is important to recognize not only what they achieved, but how they achieved it, through collaboration. Bletchley Park and its counterparts were among the earliest large-scale interdisciplinary scientific communities. Men and women worked side by side. Mathematicians worked with linguists. Engineers collaborated with chess champions. Classicists worked with physicists. It was a fusion of minds across academic divisions that had rarely intersected before. And that model, bringing diverse thinkers together to solve monumental challenges, became the blueprint for future scientific research institutions. The codebreakers may not have realized it at the time, but they were establishing the foundations for the collaborative research culture that defines the modern STEM landscape. Their legacy is also a reminder of the power of the unnoticed. The world often celebrates visible heroes, the soldiers, the commanders, the politicians. But history is shaped just as profoundly, and sometimes more so, by those whose achievements remain hidden. The codebreakers represent the quiet force of intellect in times of crisis. They demonstrate that wars are not won solely on battlefields, but in the minds of those who can see patterns others cannot. Their story reminds us that intelligence, logic, intuition, and perseverance can alter the course of nations. It teaches us that even the most overwhelming problems can be solved with methodical, relentless effort. Yet perhaps the most profound legacy of the codebreakers is the human one. They were not superhumans. They were not infallible. They were young men and women who worked themselves to exhaustion, who battled self-doubt, who feared failure because they knew the stakes were measured in human lives. They lived with the weight of knowing that a single mistake might cost hundreds of sailors their lives. They endured isolation, secrecy, and the emotional strain of knowing that their work was invisible to everyone around them. Their resilience was not born of glory, but of responsibility. And in that, they embodied a quiet heroism that the world is still learning to appreciate.
Today, in an era where digital warfare, cyber attacks, and encryption define global security, the codebreakers of WWII stand as the ancestors of a new kind of soldier, the cyber defender, the intelligence analyst, the cryptographer, the ethical hacker. Their legacy flows through every secure communication, every encrypted file, every attempt to protect digital privacy or uncover hidden threats. They did not know the digital age they were shaping, but they built its foundation brick by brick, algorithm by algorithm, machine by machine. As we conclude this journey into the world of WWII's hidden heroes, it becomes clear that their story is far more than a historical chapter. It is a testament to human creativity under pressure, to the unforeseen power of intellect, and to the quiet individuals whose contributions shape the world from the shadows. Their legacy is not confined to museums or archives. It lives in the devices we hold, the networks we depend on, and the encrypted systems that protect our daily lives. It lives in every attempt to understand complexity, to challenge the impossible, to solve problems that seem beyond the limits of comprehension. In the end, the codebreakers remind us that history is not written only by those who wield weapons, but by those who wield ideas. They prove that even in the darkest moments of war, human ingenuity can illuminate a path forward. And perhaps most importantly, they remind us that some of the greatest heroes are the ones we never see, the ones whose victories unfold far from the battlefield, in quiet rooms filled with determination, brilliance, and the unwavering belief that knowledge, properly understood and courageously applied, can change the destiny of the world.
Together we discover. Every video is a step deeper into the world of wonder. If you enjoy learning, discovering, and exploring with us, then subscribe and be part of our journey. Because the quest for knowledge never ends.